Hi, in today's video we're going to take a look at the track plan for Bexhill West. We'll discuss my thoughts around how the model is going to be put together, and later on we'll make a start building the baseboards. Hi, welcome back to Bexhill West. I'm James. Well, if you've been following this project, you'll know that I set out to rebuild in miniature all of the buildings from the Bexhill West station. And as I've done so, I've considered all the buildings, but also the structures like the platforms and the platform canopies. Well, in the background, alongside making these videos, I've been doing quite a bit of work considering the layout of the station and how I might recreate that. You see, there's no good just having the station building, because without the context of the station platforms and the railway lines that run up to it, you wouldn't necessarily know it was a station. So I've been looking very carefully at the track plan that existed at Bexhill West for the station and also for the goods yard. And I've been thinking carefully about how I might model that. Now, my ambition is to end up with something which will serve as a photographic diorama. I want to be able to take photographs of my model that are very accurate facsimiles of photos, real photos that exist of the real station. So in order to do that and to make it perfect, things have really got to be quite accurate and faithful to what was originally there. So what we'll do in this episode is I'll show you some of my design work on CAD, and we'll look at some photographs of the station site, and then I'll tell you what my thoughts are, and I'll show you the route forward. And by the end of the video you'll see my progress, and you can decide for yourselves whether or not you think the effort I've put in has been worthwhile. I hope you enjoy it. So the starting point for this enterprise has been this old Ordnance Survey map of 1908, which was just a few years after the railway line first opened. Now, if we have a look here, we can see at the bottom of the map we've got the beach on the south coast of England, lots of sand, and two railway lines are shown. We have running west to east the London, Brighton and South Coast railway line, which would have run westwards to Eastbourne and on to Brighton, and if we go in easterly along to Hastings, just a few miles to the right. But if we zoom in, the bit I'd really like us to focus on is this section of line here, which runs approximately from the south here at the terminus northwards, where it met the Hastings to Charing Cross line at Crowhurst Junction. So this is Bexhill West station building. It was a terminus station, 600 foot long platforms. There was an engine shed and a turntable facility sort of adjacent to the station platforms, but kind of folded back on itself was quite an extensive goods yard and some carriage sidings and really quite a substantial, I'm not sure what you call this, head shunt, I suppose, which fed back into the goods yard. So this is the plan I'm working to. What I'll do is I'll take this now, put it into the computer, and we'll have a look at it again in a bit more detail, and I'll try and show you some of the features that I'd like to try and recreate. So what I have here is a photograph of Bexhill on Sea from the air. At the bottom of the screen you can see the sea and the beach, and if I zoom in we can see Bexhill West station. In fact, just here in the sort of middle of the screen, running left to right, is the London, Brighton and South Coast Railway line. In fact, if we just take a moment to look across here, this runs into what was the London, Brighton and South Coast Railway station and its goods facilities here. But moving back to Bexhill West, we can see the station building, and it's two very generous platforms. We can see the engine shed, turntable, running to the right hand side of the station platform, so we can see this long head shunt for the goods yard, which is just here. And if I zoom in, we can see the extent of the goods yard. There are an awful lot of coal pens here. This area down below was, I believe, a stoneworks. And just above the goods shed and to the right was a cattle loading dock. If I zoom back out again, we can see how the tracks extend northwards through Sidley Station and off to Crowhurst. But this gives you an idea of sort of the topography of the land and roughly what the plan I'm about to show you indicates. So what we're looking at here is the section cropped out of that map I showed you previously. Now I've turned it on its side because it suits the landscape format of the screen better. And what you won't be able to tell on your screen is that I've scaled this precisely to 4mm to the foot, so that what I have here is an accurate plan for which I could plan a model. And you'll see that in red, in fact if I zoom in, you'll be able to see a bit more closely, I've started to overlay onto the drawing some of the components that I've previously designed. So I've drawn the outline of the station building, and you'll see I've put some tracks and things in. And if you look closely, you'll see there are one or two inaccuracies. But before I get to the inaccuracies, I'd like to talk to you a little bit more about some of the thinking that's gone behind what I'm trying to achieve here. So to do that, I need to show you the gradient plan for the line. So what I have on the screen now is the gradient diagram for the line running from Crowhurst to Bexhill West. Now I apologise if you've seen one of these before and you know what it's all about, but for the benefit of anybody who's not seen one before, what this is showing us is Crowhurst, which was the junction station, and that ran up to, I believe, Charing Cross was the terminus, and it gives us a distance in miles and chains from the London terminus, and it shows the line running down through Sidley through to Bexhill West. So for example, we can see that Sidley was at 61 miles and 12 chains, and Bexhill West was 62 miles and 15 chains, so just a little over a mile from Sidley. Now, for the benefit of anybody who doesn't know, a chain is a unit of linear measurement, and it's approximately 20 metres, just over. So that tells us sort of distances between these stations. Now at the bottom here, this line, which looks a little bit like some sort of graph or trace or what have you, shows the gradient at various points on the line. So for example, if we are at the platform in Bexhill West, so we can read this drawing vertically downwards. So if we're starting off at Bexhill West, that L represents the track being level. It then goes up at a gradient of 1 in 220, then steeper at 1 in 93, then level, then 1 in 500, level again, 1 in 100, and that takes us sort of up to Sidley Station. And so we can follow this gradient up and down the hills, across the viaduct, and all the way up to Crowhurst. And of course we could work out the vertical rise and fall across this distance. What's less well known perhaps is this chart at the top of the screen, this dark black line and these kind of bumps with strange numbers in. Now what these represent is a direction of the curves in the line. So the line wasn't straight as is shown in the middle of the drawing here. Very few railway lines would be straight for that length. So again, if we have a look at this top dark line, we can read the numbers 25, 38, then it switches above the line to 38, and there's a straight bit, 28, another straight bit, 28, and so on. And what these numbers represent is a radius in chains. So I told you that a chain is approximately 20 metres, 20.1 metres, something like that. So this would tell us that if we were travelling, starting at Bexhill West, travelling north, we'd go straight a bit. Then there would be a curve kind of bearing round from the left to the right, a curve of 25 chains radius, then a straight bit, then 38 chains radius in the other direction, before going into an S-bend, 38 chains in the next direction, and so forth. Now this is useful because it's helped me to plan the track of the model, and I'll explain in a minute just how that is the case. Anyway, I hope that's of some interest. Let's get back to looking at the track work. So we're back here again looking at my computer aided design plan for the station, and you can see as I have as an underlay the map. What I'm going to do is just turn that map off because it makes the drawing a little bit confusing. And if we now just look, I'll show you what my thinking is. Now each one of these squares is a 300mm grid, so that gives you some idea of the size of these boards. So they're 1200mm by 900, so 4 foot by 3 foot. And I've got 3 boards of that size, and I've shown them here: brown, green, blue, and then the station building itself sits on another board slightly smaller, which is 900mm by 600mm. And I've just shown here on this board diagonally, this is what is Terminus Road, and I'll explain in a minute why I've sort of set this up in that way. Anyway, given what I just told you about that track diagram, and in particular the chains or the radius of the curves, I was able to scale down that. I think it was, I can't remember what it was now, I think 25 chains, which I think, and I'm going from memory here, was about 6.6 meters in scaled down format. So I was able to begin with a scale curve for this track, and then from once I'd got that radius in, I was able to plot alongside it the widths of the adjacent tracks and the platforms. Now what you could see if I zoom in here, for example, what you can see with this sort of rectangular gridded section here, this is the structure of my station canopies, which I've designed previously and which I've shown you in a previous episode. Now, whilst I was thinking about all of this, I was thinking about what was I going to use for the track, and ideally I'd like to go with something a fine scale, maybe EM gauge track, but because I'm not primarily building a model railway and I didn't really want to get involved in building fine scale track, what I've done is I've chosen to use Pico 00 gauge track work. So it's going to be slightly out of scale, but I think it's probably a good compromise. Now what I've done, and I'm going to make an interesting, what I hope will be an interesting video in its own right, is I've been able to use the diagrams that Pico present on their website. If I zoom in here, for example, and digitize that point work, so you can see what I've done here. In fact, is I've used a scaled photograph of this three-way point, and then here I've got sort of digitized versions of the others. So I'm going to run through that in a separate video. But what I'm able to do with those is map out exactly the geometry of the track work, and I know that the radius of that bend here is exactly right. So my hope is that when I've got a train parked in the platform, that the curves of the carriages and the engines and whatever are going to look just right when I compare a photograph of my model with what existed in the real world. So this then has determined my starting point for building the station. Now, I've been mindful of viewing angles and things, and we'll talk more about that another time. I don't want this video to get too long, but that's basically the starting point for the model. Now, I don't think I'm going to have the time or the money, in fact, to build the whole thing. However, I wanted to do something that would be accurate enough so that if somebody else wanted to take this project over once I've got the station done and what have you, that they could, and it would be accurate. Now, what I have done is the work I've done for this station area, I have done for the whole of the railway system here, and including using the gradient map to work out precisely the gradients at various points all over this drawing, so that I actually have a 3D model of all of the track work, but we'll talk about that another time. So having decided upon the unit size for my baseboards for the station area, let's spend a little bit of time thinking about what my thoughts are on how I'm going to go about making them. So what you can see on the screen now is one of the baseboards. This is the small section at the end of the plan that I just showed you that the station building will sit on. And if I take it apart, you can see its structure. This is going to be a steel framework, the steel rectangular hollow section tube, which is 40mm deep, 20mm wide, and then I've got a 20 by 20mm strengthening piece across the middle, and then for the top I'm going to use 9mm plywood, and when it's all screwed together that will be an immensely strong unit, very lightweight. It's never going to twist or bend or warp or what have you if it gets damp, and it's a nice small unit size that I can just have on my tabletop and just work on an element of it one at a time. Now if it proves that the unit size really is too small, then all I need to do is weld together the boards as I make them, and so I could make this bigger. But for now I'm going to be working in small steel framed units. What we now have is the plan with the 3 larger boards and the smaller one on the end combined into one 3D unit. So if I flip it over, we can see the structural elements underneath, and I have the track plan as a transparent overlay on the top, so that I can look at it from underneath and I can, for example, check that my point work is not going to foul the structure underneath. If I flip this round, I can do a number of things. For example, I can look down the length of the track and sort of just enjoy the pleasing curves of it all. Now, having got the model to this point on the screen, what I can do is now drop onto here all my 3D models of the station building, the loading dock, the platforms, the canopies, etc., etc., and I can build up on the screen a really accurate model of exactly what my physical model is going to look like. Indeed, I can laser cut cork pieces to run under all this track, and I can engrave into it all the tracks and everything else, so that the actual construction of this thing will be really very quick. And in fact I've made a start on it. So what's going to happen in this video now is I'm just going to talk you through the construction of these baseboard units. And here you can see the finished effect. That edge trimmed nice and smooth with the bearing guided router bit. The corners all finished and dressed nicely, they all look good powder coated. And the completed baseboard frame, lightweight, very stiff. And here we have the first 3 boards all made, dimensionally very accurate, as I say, lightweight, strong and a very low profile. And I have to say I'm very pleased with the outcome. Well, there you go. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you enjoyed seeing how I put together those baseboards. Certainly I think it's maybe a little bit unusual going with a steel frame, but I think for the reasons I described earlier, I think it's going to suit me just well. I look forward to continuing with the rest of the build, and of course with the CAD series as well. So the next video that comes out will be another one for the CAD series. Once again, thank you very much indeed for all the positive comments that have come in relation to that series. I've got a stack of questions and I'm going to start answering some of those and hopefully helping those of you who've had problems overcome them. Anyway, until next time, thank you for watching. Bye bye.